Hey folks, this is Fernando doing our video for the more survivalists. First of all, thanks for all of you guys that have subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate your support, you sharing the videos or thumbs up whenever it is that you like it. That really encourages me to keep doing videos, so thanks for that. In this video, I'd like to talk about the incident in Ferguson with a Michael Brown shooting. A couple points regarding handling rioting and civil unrest. We saw what happened in Ferguson. We saw the following day how it started happening in other cities. It's not crazy to think that these kind of somewhat violent demonstrations that end up in arson and looting, they will become a little bit more common as time goes by. Not only in the United States, it's possible that it may end up happening in other places. So if you haven't seen the previous video that I did, I suggest doing so. Most of it is basic common sense stuff. You know, if you know there's going to be problems, if you know there's going to be a demonstration with a potential civil unrest, rioting and looting, don't go there. Avoid it. That should be obvious, clear enough. Now, we saw, of course, reporters there in the scene doing their job. We saw, of course, protesters trying to make their point. Then we saw lots of people that were taking advantage of the situation so as to commit crimes, so as to start robbing, burning, stealing stuff, looting. Even if you have a legitimate purpose in mind, which, for example, would be protesting peacefully, understand that if there's a possibility of this happening, maybe you want to reconsider your actions. And most of all, if you don't have a reason of your own, if you're not trying to protest yourself, avoid it by all costs. We had footage from last night with hundreds or dozens, if not hundreds of people driving, being caught in traffic in the middle of the riot. I mean, why on earth would you go drive around that night, the night in decades when there's the most amount of violence on the street? Avoid that at all costs. Avoid it as much as possible. If you have to go somewhere because you simply do not have any other choice, find alternative routes. That's what you do when you have to deal with this kind of thing very often. This is, you know, I understand that maybe people are not used to these kind of demonstrations, of rioting on the streets and such. But when this happens more often, it's just about using your common sense. You know there's going to be trouble in the downtown area of your city or wherever it is that problems may occur. You avoid that. You find alternative routes and you drive around it if you have no other choice but to go somewhere that night. All right. Then something else that I mentioned in the previous video is if you have no other choice but to be there, or if you are suddenly caught by the mass of people, by the mob, and you find yourself in the middle of the riot, don't engage, don't participate in it in any way, all right? Of course, don't start looting with the rest of them. Don't start burning down buildings or burning cars and such. Don't engage with violent confrontations with the police or other rioters, but also don't be part of it at all. We saw a CNN reporter being surprised that she was attacked and threatened by some of the looters as she was filming with her crew. What on earth did you think would happen when you are filming someone committing crimes? When you're filming a mass of people committing crimes just in front of you, and you're getting all that on tape, you know, which is pure evidence that will be used against them later on. Of course you're going to be threatened. Of course you're going to be attacked, and there's actually a good chance that you may end up getting hurt or even killed for doing so. So I understand that reporters are doing their job. I also understand that they don't quite understand how dangerous some of the things are that they are doing. They don't understand how dangerous someone can be when they feel that they can get away with anything, when they feel that you are endangering them by your actions, which in this case would be filming and recording the crime that they are committing. That's the kind of thing that can easily get you a bullet in the head or in the torso. You know, you definitely don't want to participate in any of that. You don't want to engage with looters and violent agitators. Now, regarding specifically the Michael Brown incident, there's a few things that I'd like to mention as well. When the first protests started regarding this incident, and there were mostly peaceful protests, I did talk about my opinion regarding the militarization of police, about how it was over the top, about how police were being too militarized and could have been handled some other way. I do not like the idea of the police and the military getting in a blurry mess where they both become kind of the same thing. Police should be police, military should be military. I think that there's a clear line that should be drawn there, and I don't like the militarization of any police anywhere, right? So that's a little bit of a criticism that I made regarding the police in the United States and also other places. Now, just as I've said that, I will also say that in this case, specifically in the shooting of Michael Brown, I think that you clearly have someone that was pretty much in a position where there was really nothing that the police officer could actually do other than engage, other than shoot in self-defense. Several things. First of all, we're talking about a guy, Michael Brown, that had committed a robbery just before the actual shooting. That's not something that you just can ignore. It speaks of the person that ended up getting involved in the shooting. It's not the same thing to have a law-abiding citizen all of a sudden appearing with a bullet in his head, right, dropping dead, and the police officer making an argument that he had no other choice but to use that force. And then you look at the police record this person has, and there's nothing there. There's no prior history of violent actions, of violent behavior, and all of a sudden he's dead. It's not the same thing as having someone that clearly has a violent nature because you actually freaking caught it on tape just moments ago. That makes a very strong case for the police officer's argument that he was attacked, that he had no other choice but to shoot back. Many times we've seen the media talk about Michael Brown as a baby or as a boy. This guy was 6'4" tall, 295 pounds. I mean, the guy was pretty big, and people have this completely misguided idea that police officers are, magic wielding ninjas with extraordinary powers and skills of combat, and they can disarm anyone. This is very childish in many ways, but I also understand that it's a matter of ignorance. Even adults in many cases think this way. Many adults think that police officers are superhumans of some kind, that a police officer is something beyond the limitations of a normal human being. Folks, in case you're not familiar with police officers, their training, their capabilities, they have the same limitations to a great extent, just like you have. They have a certain training, they have a certain understanding of how to handle violent confrontations, how to use a firearm. Police officers in general are not expert shooters. Police officers in general are not martial art experts. They're not, as you sometimes see in these cheesy 80s, 90s movies where all police officers are karate or taekwondo experts and they throw flying kicks. Police officers are guys, and if we have an average size police officer and we have a 6'4" tall guy that's weighing almost 300 pounds, there's a good chance that the police officer, even a well-trained, fit police officer, will have a very tough time dealing with a close combat confrontation with that guy, simply because of the size and strength difference. Police officers are not superhuman beings. They have, in spite of the training that they are not UFC champion fighters, all right? There's nothing magical that a police officer can do if he's simply outweighed and outmuscled by a much stronger, bigger guy. So this person that has been described so many times as a baby almost, and you look at the picture and the guy is huge, indistinctively of his skin color or ethnicity or whatever it is you want to bring up to the discussion, he's a very big, strong guy. And if a police officer is finding himself struggling with this person over the control of his firearm, he really has no other choice but to start shooting. The basic training that a police officer will get regarding such incidents is you have to shoot. You don't have any other choice, because if that guy gets the weapon away from you, he may end up shooting you, he may end up shooting someone else. You just cannot allow that to happen. If someone is crazy enough, if someone is violent enough to risk doing that, then you have no other choice but to shoot. All right. There's nothing that a police officer could have done in that case. This is not to say that shooting people is the one and only reaction. We've seen excessive use of force many times. When you have 60-pound lady being pummeled by a police officer that weighs twice as much as she does, there's really no excuse for that. All right. Obviously enough, because of a matter of size, and of course the training gives you a little bit of an advantage, although as mentioned before, it has its limitations. If you are confronted by someone that weighs twice as much as you do, there's very little that you can get away with in terms of hand-to-hand combat just because of your training, right? But when you have such an overwhelming strength superiority compared to the person you're trying to immobilize, then you do have other options. Now in this case, obviously enough, no, you cannot engage with a guy so much bigger than you and expect, no one would be expecting you to risk your life, especially when you pretty much have no chance of winning or stopping or immobilizing and arresting a much bigger, stronger person. Then when it comes to the actual shooting, many times it has been brought up in the media that why was he shot so many times? Again, complete lack of understanding of what happens during a shooting. Shootings are not as seen in movies. You don't shoot a suspect or an attacker once and he flies through the air, tumbling as he goes, flying feet, being pushed back by the power of the bullet. It doesn't happen. Actually, many times you shoot and you're not even registering if you're hitting or not, if your rounds are hitting and having any effect or not. That's why police officers are trained to stop. You are trained to shoot until you stop the threat. If someone is walking towards you, apparently in this case, not going to be trying to make any judgment calls regarding what happened or what not. Obviously, impossible for me to do so. But if the situation has been as it seems, which is the police officer was pretty much attacked from inside the patrol vehicle, he started shooting, there's some bullet rounds of him trying to shoot. The police officer talks about Michael Brown grabbing the gun, and he doesn't use these words, but it basically brings it out of battery and he pulls the trigger, and the police officer says it clicks, and it's not shooting. That's because the slide is being pulled back and it's not firing as he pulls the trigger. All right, he pulls the trigger, but because he's wrestling over the control of the firearm, the slide is moved a little bit, and if it's moved back, even if it's not ejecting a round, it's still moved back so much that even when pulling the trigger, it does not shoot. Apparently, by fighting over it, he managed to shoot a couple rounds and such. It's an extremely violent situation. Again, the size of the attacker, the size of the person you're fighting over the control of the gun with is very important. If you haven't done any of this in actual training, you maybe don't understand. It's very difficult to fight with someone over the control of a firearm. In some cases, I've seen this in training. In some cases, even if you repeat the exercise time and again, you repeat it 10 times. If the other guy is stronger than you, if the other guy is faster, more skilled in hand-to-hand combat, you may do this 10 times and you're still going to be getting your weapon taken away from you and shot with your own gun. I've seen it happen in training many times. If someone is faster, stronger than you, you're basically done. The only hope you have is moving backwards fast enough and start shooting, because if he gets control, if he gets his hands on you, you are done. You have zero chance of doing anything. Then you can bring into the argument if you have a knife so as to do something, but it's pretty much a lose situation for you against a faster, stronger, or even a much more skilled person. But strength, size does come into account, absolutely. So we have this violent confrontation first in a vehicle. The officer does correctly what he's supposed to do. He was just attacked. So he's trying to arrest someone that's obviously violent, crazy enough so as to do what he just did, attack a police officer, try to disarm him, try to shoot him with his own gun apparently. So he tries to stop this person, he tries to arrest him. He gets out of the vehicle, he confronts this person, Michael Brown. There was some accounts saying that Michael Brown was shot in the back. The forensics show that he was not shot in the back. So he apparently turns around and starts closing in, starts moving towards the police officer. Now, here's something that many people may not quite understand. When a police officer, especially one that you just try to punch and try to take his gun away, if that police officer said the only thing you should be doing is going to the floor with your hands up, that's the only thing you should be doing. You should not be closing the distance towards a police officer. You should not be walking, especially when you're being ordered, after a fight, after you just attacked a police officer and you're being now ordered to stop moving. You should not walk forward. That's closing the distance. In his training, the police officer is taught that distance, you have a limit. You have those 21 yards, those 21 feet. You should not allow anyone to close in beyond that. Because at that range, at that distance, it's such a short distance that anyone rushing in charging, he has a good chance of disarming you and killing you with your own gun or beating you to death. So you just cannot allow, especially it's the Tweller drill, it's especially referred to regarding the use of a knife. The idea of the police officer with a gun, the attacker with a knife. What's the distance you should be allowing? About 21 feet. Not more than that, because that's more than enough for him to just take a few quick steps and stab you fatally before you're actually capable of stopping him with your gun. So the gun is not some magic wand that you can just move and stop people magically. You actually have to shoot someone that's attacking you with intent of killing you and hit, impact, incapacitate him, which is not nearly as easy as people seem to think. Something that's very often brought up by people that don't know a lot about self-defense, firearms, and shooting is that why didn't the police officer shoot to wound instead of shooting to kill? You never shoot to wound anyone. You never shoot to do anything other than to stop the person that is attacking you. You always shoot to stop, which basically means you shoot center of mass, right? You shoot around here, you shoot to stop, you shoot to kill the person that you're trying to stop with lethal force. You're using your gun, it's lethal force. There's no in-between point with a gun. You have something that you can do with a stick, with a baton. You can do other stuff. With a gun, whenever you actually use a gun, you use it so as to effectively stop the threat, and the only way you use it, the lethal weapon for in such a way, is killing the person. You shoot center of mass, and of course, that's the outcome that is to be expected. So you use lethal force when you have no other choice. Now, when you actually use it, there's no in-between point. There's no shooting to the leg. This is something that a lot of people have mentioned me through the years. Well, can't you just shoot him in the leg? Shoot someone in the leg and stop it. In that case, in that kind of situation, there's no shooting to the leg. One person even told me, very naive, can the police officer shoot the gun out of the attacker? Like seen in the movies. Of course not. And there's no shooting in the leg, there's no shooting in the arm, there's no warning shots. When the person sees you with a gun and he's still coming forward, that's the moment when you end up using the lethal force, especially when it's a much stronger person. Let's suppose it's 60-pound, 10-year-old that's coming towards you, and he's obviously not armed, and you can probably stop him with one arm, right? It's in that kind of case, there's practically no excuse for you using lethal force, even if the kid fails to obey the commands that the police officer is giving. It's quite understandable that you see no weapon and you're capable of using other means other than lethal force to stop it. Now, if the 10-year-old kid has a gun or seems to have a gun, maybe a replica, and you're telling him to put the gun down and he's not doing that and he's bringing it up, it's within the correct action of the police officer to use his own gun, to use lethal force when he thinks that he's about to get shot himself, even if it's a 10-year-old, even if it's a 12-year-old, even if it's a child, even though it would be terrible for a police officer, no doubt, but it's according to his training, he has to shoot so as to avoid being shot himself. All right, and in this case, with a stronger, big attacker closing in, shooting is the only way in which he could have stopped him. And how many times do you shoot? You shoot until the threat stops. If you shoot 5, 6, 10, 15 times and your shots are not hitting in any in center of mass or the central nervous system or something that stops him immediately, until the attacker goes down and stops effectively, you keep on shooting. It may take several rounds. With a bigger guy and shots not as well placed, it's not surprising that he was shot as many times as he was. Folks, that's all for now. Just a few comments. Just as I've said, some of the things I do not like about how the police handle these kind of things, I will say that in this case, it obviously, at least to me, it seems that things were handled in the only way in which they could have been handled, given the circumstances presented to the police officer. Folks, that's all for now. Share, take care, see you in our next video.